Welcome into OutKick the show. I'm your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I am back from New York City. I hope all of you are having a fantastic Wednesday. Getting ready for Lock It In. Starts you off with the weekend look ahead for the NFL and for college football. As always, the gambling picks are up at OutKick if you want to dive in. 11 winners for you today. This is important. Right now, hate to brag, hate to draw attention to myself, but I am at a 79% winning percentage if you just played the Lock It In television picks. And I am at a 67% winning percentage if you blindly played every single pick that I have given you so far on OutKick. So, Fade the Picks guy is taking this on the chin in a big way right now. Fade the Picks guy has disappeared. Hashtag respect the picks, surging up the board. If you have bet against every single thing I've said to do, you've won 33% of your bets through OutKick or 21% through the television show. Rough spot to be in for Fade the Picks guy. All right, we got several things I want to get to here today. Antonio Brown, Instagram insanity. Zeke, the deal. Why most people are not smart enough to understand how it went down. Jared Goff gets a big deal. Also some interesting angles to hit there. And Michelle Beadle is out at ESPN. They are buying her out, and they are kicking her to the curb. All right, let's start with Antonio Brown. And by the way, you can sign up for the OutKick VIP and get all of our picks, plus an autographed copy of my most recent book, if you go to OutKick.com. All right, so there are several different things I want to get to, but we're starting with Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown went on Instagram just earlier today, and he tweeted out a picture of a fine that he had gotten, a letter acknowledging that he had not been fulfilling the obligations and requirements that he has under his NFL contract. And as a result, the Raiders, and this was a letter signed by Mike Mayock, were fining him $54,000. And that $54,000 fine prompted Antonio Brown to go on Instagram and write and tag his own team, the Raiders. And it's hard to understand exactly what he's saying here, so I'm going to do my best to read it. This is Antonio Brown on Instagram. When your own team want to hate, but there's no stopping me, all caps, this is all in caps, by the way, no punctuation, now devil is a lie. All right, the opening comment by Antonio Brown to being fined $54,000 on Instagram is as follows. When your own team want to hate, but there's no stopping me now, devil is a lie. I don't know what in the world that means. I can't really even decipher it. That is the first sentence of Antonio Brown's comments about the Raiders. Everyone got to pay this year, then all caps, so we clear. No, we are not in any way actually clear, Antonio Brown, because you have managed to string together a series of words that do not actually make sense when read in conjunction. Therefore, this entire statement, you guys can translate it as best you can. This is Antonio Brown reacting to his $54,000 fine. When your own team want to hate, but there's no stopping me, now devil is a lie. Everyone got to play this year, so we clear. No, we are not in fact clear. He did tag the Raiders there. This raises an intriguing question. All right, think about this for a minute. How many employees, and in as much as Antonio Brown might not understand that he's an employee, he is in fact an employee, how many employees in the country could post a discipline letter from their company on social media for everyone to read with their boss's signature on it? Insult, I think that's the intent of that comment, to call the Raiders haters for actually implementing the terms of their contract. How many people could do that and not get suspended or fired from their jobs? I can't even think of anyone else out there that is a traditional employee. Now, Antonio Brown is skilled at catching the football, but he is a straight-up employee. He's not very much different in terms of his rights than your average employee out there in general. I can't even think. Now, some people, like initially I'm thinking, okay, what about actors, actresses, rock stars? They're self-employed. They are self-employed. They're not typically direct employees of companies. I think almost everyone would be fired for what Antonio Brown did. And what's interesting here is Antonio Brown doesn't actually make the Raiders that much money, because some people came back and said, well, when you make your company that much money, but Antonio Brown doesn't actually make the Raiders more money unless the Raiders make the playoffs. Whatever jerseys he sells, it's going to be a rounding error for the overall Raiders brand. I suppose if television ratings go up a little bit, maybe the team could get that. But in general, an individual player, unless he leads to the playoffs and potential championships, is a wash. So this is wild. The people who have to be enjoying this the most have to be Ben Roethlisberger, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Tomlin, because every time Antonio Brown goes on social media, he reveals himself to be more of an idiot and more of a bad teammate. And everybody out there who is in any way trying to defend him looks dumber and dumber every single day. And I think it's just a bad look for Antonio Brown, but it's also indicative of why athletes shouldn't really be role models. Antonio Brown, he's good at catching the football. He's good at catching the football when he actually shows up at work. For the other aspects of his life, I'm not sure he's good at anything. And in fact, he may well be an overall hindrance to the success of everyone else that surrounds him. We'll see how the Steelers do this year, and we'll also see how the Raiders do. But Mike Mayock and John Gruden have to be questioning their decision to actually bring him in. All right, so that's my thoughts on Antonio Brown. Ezekiel Elliott got his deal done. Now, this is a great example. NFL contracts are not guaranteed. People kind of roughly understand, I think, that cliche, but they don't really understand what it means in practice, okay? So Zeke Elliott had 2 years left on his deal. According to Sport Track, which follows all these different contracts, he had $17 million left on his deal that he was owed for the next 2 seasons. They then announced that he was signing a 6-year, $90 million extension. But of that $100 million plus that he is owed, only $50 million of it is guaranteed. So you can immediately toss off the $100 million contract headline. This was about Ezekiel Elliott's ego more than it was about the finances themselves. It appears, most likely, that he has got a 4-year, $50 million contract, but really it's only $33 million in additional money. Now, we won't know until all of these terms officially come out, but it appears to me that the Cowboys have got Ezekiel Elliott for around $12.5 million a year, and then all the big money in this deal will probably come in years 5, 6, 7, and 8, when the Cowboys can just cut bait and they won't owe him any more money. So much of this deal was about giving the Lemmings an opportunity to run out and say, oh, Ezekiel Elliott's getting over $100 million. He's the highest paid player ever. A lot of it was a function of that, because when you actually look at the dollar figure, over half of it will never materialize. It's a made-up dollar amount. With that in mind, I don't actually think the Cowboys are in that bad of a shape if they got Ezekiel Elliott for each of the next 4 years, potentially, at $12.5 million a year. I think that's still high for a running back, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not out of control. Now, also, the biggest issue the Cowboys have is that's $50 million guaranteed. And the problem with the $50 million guaranteed is all of the risk of loss in the early years is on the Cowboys in this deal. So if, for instance, in the first game back against the Giants on Sunday, Ezekiel Elliott tears his Achilles and he's out for a long period of time, the Cowboys still have to give him $50 million. So this is the bigger issue here, is that risk of loss has completely shifted to the Cowboys from $17 million to $50 million. They've added around $33 million guaranteed onto their salary cap that they can never escape. So if Zeke does decide to walk away after getting injured, they would still have to pay him. I think the likelihood is that he doesn't have anything left by the end of this 4 years, and I think that's the reason why Ezekiel Elliott was sitting out. Most running backs, and this is a larger scale issue that needs to be addressed in the CBA, Most running backs don't really get to their second contract. This is about Melvin Gordon. This is about Le'Veon Bell. This is about Ezekiel Elliott. The pounding is so intense on these guys that by the time they get to their second contract, they have no real value left. So if you're not a first-round pick, you never really make any money in the NFL as a running back for a very, very long time, and that's the challenge of the new CBA, and I would imagine that'll come up as a bigger issue going forward. But the key here is, while there's going to be a lot of attention to the $90 million extension and the $100 million plus on the 8-year deal looks substantial, what only thing that matters is the guaranteed money, and right here we're talking about $50 million guaranteed, which looks downright affordable for the Dallas Cowboys. That would be the way that I would break it down in general. Okay, another aspect of the CBA is Jared Goff, and it helps to explain what the Rams are doing with Jared Goff's contract. Jared Goff just got the most guaranteed money in the history of the NFL in his new deal with the Rams. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, how does that happen? Why does Jared Goff get the dollar figure that he did? Why is he making so much money? And the answer is, and here, by the way, is Jared Goff signed a 4-year, $134 million extension that includes $110 million in guarantees and will keep him in LA through the 2024 season. So what's fascinating here is quarterbacks now are insanely undervalued when they are young and they immediately produce. Okay, let me explain why. It used to be in the system in which Sam Bradford was the final number 1 pick that you would get a huge initial contract, $50 million, let's say, like Sam Bradford did and Vince Young got. And by the new contract, for instance, Jake Locker got $12 million to play for the Tennessee Titans. Both Jake Locker and Vince Young were busts. Vince Young cost over $50 million. Jake Locker cost only $12 million. Why was there so much substantial difference in their contracts? Because of the way the CBA was constructed. Right now, Jared Goff is under his rookie year. First-round picks get 4 years guaranteed, and then the team has an option to pick up that 5th year. Jared Goff has played 3 years. So what the Rams did, which is very, very smart, I believe, was they added 4 more years on top of Jared Goff's existing 2-year contract, and they were able to get him under the market price by immediately giving him a lot more guaranteed money in the meantime, because he's so substantially underpaid relative to what he would make in the open market in year 4 and in year 5. The difference is they were willing to substantially guarantee $110 million as opposed to guaranteeing $50 for Ezekiel Elliott. So, by the time Jared Goff's deal is coming up in 2024, with the new CBA coming into place, the Rams will look insanely smart because they were able to lock him in at an incredibly low rate thanks to the 2 years left on his rookie contract. Now, Goff didn't have to sign this deal. He could have waited and bet on himself and known that he had the opportunity to cash in somewhere down the line. But I think his agents and his representatives likely said, hey, Jared, you're getting the most guaranteed money in the history of the NFL if you have a substantial injury like Alex Smith did. Like Alex Smith just got hurt in the Washington Redskins situation, you will still have over $100 million, $110 million to be able to live on for the rest of your life and do an incredibly good job forever, right? Now, the one thing this answers is there's been a lot of scuttlebutt. Oh, Sean McVay doesn't really like Jared Goff that much. Maybe Sean McVay thinks that he can find a quarterback that fits his system that's every bit as good as Jared Goff. I think this puts that to rest because it twins Jared Goff and Sean McVay together for years and years to come, going all the way to 2023. Both of these guys are together and will end up getting hooked up. It's going to be intriguing to follow and see how exactly this goes. All right, any questions that you guys might have either on Facebook or on Twitter here in Periscope about either of these contracts from a legal perspective? I think most people don't really understand the business or the legalities of what exactly is going on with these contracts. I think the Cowboys made a smart move, and I think that there was a smart move that was made by the Rams here. Next CBA is a great question. I talked about that some on my radio show. To me, these are the things that I would like to see in the CBA if I were, as an objective fan, looking at them. I said on my show this morning, I'd like to see the players get more guaranteed money. And I'd also like to see the owners and teams be able to get relief if you have an Alex Smith-like devastating injury. And let me explain what I mean by that. When Alex Smith got injured as he did for the Washington Redskins, the challenge was that they have now an awful quarterback situation. They got Colt McCoy, they got Case Keenum, and they've got Dwayne Haskins. But they also have all of the contractual obligations for Alex Smith, even though he's not choosing to refuse to play or something like that, he's injured. I think that each team, much like they have the franchise tag, should have the ability to write off a contract if a player gets significantly injured and they decide they want to retire, because I don't know how the NFL benefits from the Washington Redskins being held hostage by the bad luck that befell Alex Smith. Now, if you make a bad signing or you overpay a player, that's the risk of doing business. But I think they should ameliorate the risk of massive long-term injuries like happened to Alex Smith and allow teams relief. Now, not for a ton of players, so you can't just go out and overpay everybody. But if you sign a player and he gets significantly injured, I think you should be able to get relief from that contract and be able to go back into the salary cap and pay other players to come in and replace them if you so desire, which I think the Redskins would. That's one thing I would like to see in the CBA. I'd also like to see added playoff teams. I think adding playoff teams, there are 12 now. I think going to 16 would be better. Give more teams and more fans a chance for your team to make the playoff. Half of the teams make the NBA playoffs. Why not do that in the NFL too? I also think eliminating the way the preseason is set up right now, it's absolutely awful. The way that the preseason is set up right now makes zero sense. All right, final thing. Michelle Beadle. Michelle Beadle is now fired at ESPN. They have officially let her know that she is done. According to the New York Post, they are negotiating her exit, and she is officially finished at ESPN. This, I think, in conjunction with Jamel Hill and some other recent decisions, is Jimmy Pitaro trying to send a notice to the woke universe at ESPN that your days of being able to dominate and say whatever you want and be far left-wing woke losers on our paycheck is over. We are no longer going to countenance that. We're not going to allow it. These are big decisions. Jamel Hill gone, and now you've got Michelle Beadle out. I think the message is being sent clearly that that style of perpetual outrage and woke search for justice is no longer part of the platform at ESPN. I think it's a smart move by Jimmy Pitaro. Finally, I want to go back into the Dave Chappelle special that I talked about. I tweeted out this, which I think is fascinating. There's a huge disconnect between the critical response to Dave Chappelle on Rotten Tomatoes and the fan response. Fan response right now is 99% positive. The critics' response is, earlier it was 17% positive, now it's 28% positive. I think one of the largest disconnects between critic and fan out there. And this is why I think the Dave Chappelle special is such a fascinating example of our modern society. Critics, by and large, are far left-wing loons who are perpetually offended by everything. They have been empowered by the rise of social media, all the little blue checkmark brigade that doesn't have an actual audience but gets verified, and they run around chirping and trying to cancel things all day, okay? That cancel culture that exists has infected every aspect of American society. And as a result, many comedians are afraid to say a lot of the things that Dave Chappelle said. And I think it's an important win for free speech advocates like me for comedians to come back out and be the forward-facing tip of the spear of the free speech movement. I said it on CNN that I'm an absolutist when it comes to the First Amendment and boobs. I always will be. I love all of you. DBAP unless you need to. SBAP. My name is Clay Travis. This has been OutKick, the show. Be live on Lock It In at 4:30, 3:30, 2:30, 1:30 as you move across the country from east to west. That's a little bit over an hour, 40 minutes from now, and a little bit less than an hour, 40 minutes from now. And we'll be live from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern on OutKick the coverage. Welcome in Philly and Detroit to that audience. All right. Love all of you guys. Kisses. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. I'll see you guys. Love you. Thank you, Facebook. See y'all.